Hey, friendly listener, are you enjoying the Impact Podcast? Then give us a thumbs up and leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Shegerian, and I'm so excited to have with us today Lisa Morden. She's the Vice President of Safety, Sustainability, and Occupational Health with Kimberly-Clark. Welcome, Lisa, to the Impact Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today, John. Very excited to connect and have a chat with you.
You know, Lisa, we were talking a little bit off air before we started taping, and it goes with great honor that I'm able to say that in 2019, GreenBiz, which is one of the greatest platforms in the sustainability world, named you one of the 25 badass women shaking up the corporate climate movement. So share a little bit about the Lisa Morden youth story, growing up, and how you became named one of the 25 badass women shaking up the corporate climate movement over at Kimberly-Clark.
You bet, John, and shout out to GreenBiz. I love that group, that team. They've been incredibly supportive and helpful for the movement, shall we say? And right. We've always gotten a ton of value of working with that group. So appreciate the recognition, no question. So I'm a small town Canadian girl. Actually, I grew up in a small town in northwestern Ontario. And, all family and friends all grew up there. We spent a lot of time outdoors, actually living up in the kind of the heart of the Canadian boreal forest, if you will. So a lot of time outdoors, and a lot of family and friends really highly connected to the forest products industry and to natural resource-based industries. So you grew up with a huge appreciation for and a value for what natural resource management, forest management can do for people, families, communities, et cetera. So that was a big inspiration for me, I think, through time. I also spent a little bit of time living in Asia and the Middle East when I was young as well. So you see a very different world, obviously, John.
Right.
You saw the implications of poverty, socioeconomic disparity, and even insecurity and security stressors in the world. And I think that just sort of really opens up your views and shapes a lot of your perspectives on the world, and certainly helped to shape some of my career ambitions and aspirations too. So very quickly, all of that brought me to an amazing opportunity to work at a pulp mill that Kimberly-Clark ran in northwestern Ontario. So that was my first start with the company back when I was a young whippersnapper, if you will.
And so how many years have you been in and around Kimberly-Clark?
I'm approaching my 30-year anniversary, John. So it's been since I was clearly a very, 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 very young.
Good for you. You know, that doesn't look physically possible, but whatever, it is what it is. And 30 years is a long time. But Kimberly-Clark has been around a long time. So talk a little bit. So if you've been there 30 years or working in that ecosystem, like you're saying, starting off at a pulp mill to now, can you share some of the highlights of your career and things that you now could look back on? We're going to talk about the forward in a little bit and where we are today and where we are going and where Kimberly-Clark's going in the future. But talk a little bit about looking backwards, some of the highlights and some of the most enjoyable moments and proud moments of your career.
Oh, thanks, John. Absolutely. Working in that pulp mill environment, right, is very environmentally intensive kind of an operation with forest lands, et cetera. And we had a lot of big challenges and an amazing small but mighty team. And I think as getting started in the environmental management space back then in my career and seeing how that team rallied to support improving outcomes, both environmentally and within the community, was super inspiring to me, and something that I've continued to try to replicate throughout the course of my career. So, coming out of that environment and doing some turns in various functional roles within Kimberly-Clark in North America, but then certainly expanding around the world to our operations and helping to support the teams around the world to drive their environmental programs has been a big highlight for me, and certainly influenced the path forward. I did, of course, take a couple of spins in our business teams as well, which was certainly outside of my wheelhouse, but an amazing learning opportunity to understand the inner workings of the business from multiple perspectives and angles. So huge pivot point for me. And, as time went on, I had some really fantastic bosses in those roles and supervisors that really encouraged me to build principles of sustainability into the business that I was helping to lead and run at the time. So now you begin to shape it from a product perspective and a brand perspective and a customer consumer perspective. So hugely influential experience for me as we went along the journey.
It and what I realized along the way, interviewing so many wonderful people at great brands like you and like Kimberly-Clark, is that when you've been through the line in different shapes, or form, and not just been in a sustainability position, but got to know the products and the business groups. And some people are supply chain managers that I meet before they become chief sustainability officers. You really can make a bigger impact once you get the sustainability title then as well, because you have a deeper knowledge of really the business and how it really runs. Is that true?
100% true. Couldn't agree with you more. And I don't think sustainability is a multidisciplinary function. It's a team sport, right? It requires your supply chain teams and your brand teams and your marketing teams and your innovation teams to all really be collaborating with that sort of value chain view, all the way from source to shelf, stump to dump, if you will. And really understanding those perspectives allows you to walk a mile in the shoes of those other functional areas that are pivotal to help make a difference. So, it touches everything in the organization. So you have to be a little bit dynamic in your ability to talk the language.
How many years have you had this title, Vice President of Safety, Sustainability, and Occupational Health?
I've been in this specific role for approaching 3 years at this point.
Wow. Got it.
Yeah.
So if I was to ask you the Lisa Morden life mantra or mission statement, what would it be?
Maybe it's not so much a mantra, but it's certainly a philosophy that I like to live by, which is very much about being mindful of how, when I engage with people across the business and outside the business, frankly, how do I make them feel? I really need a sense of inspiration and an understanding of the world of the possible, right? Yeah. With at the same time creating a sense of urgency, because some of the challenges that face the world from a sustainability perspective are imperative, and the scenarios are becoming more concerning every second that ticks by. So inspiring innovation and a growth mindset while at the same time creating that imperative and sense of urgency is kind of how I like to operate, generally speaking. So strategic thinking with an action bias is put another way. So that's kind of how I like to operate throughout the organization.
And speaking of the organization, obviously everyone knows Kimberly-Clark and the iconic brand that it is, and the brands that you own, and that we've all grown up with and come to love over 150 years. And for our listeners and viewers who want to find Lisa and her great colleagues and all the important work they're doing at Kimberly-Clark, you can go to www.kimberly-clark.com, kimberly-clark.com. How big is the organization? It's 150 years old. We have the age, but how big is it now?
Yeah, the company is about 43,000 employees strong at this point, right? So with a very large global footprint. So the exciting part about that is that we operate in so many different cultures in different countries with different markets. So you really have this wonderful opportunity, I think, to integrate a lot of diverse perspectives when we think about our goals and ambitions for a more sustainable future as a company, the perspectives that come to the table to shape that and to help to define the initiatives and how we activate are coming from just massively different backgrounds and diverse backgrounds. And I think that's part of the power of how we have been progressing and the power of unlocking our teams to move forward with some really great outcomes ultimately.
The company's purpose is better care for a better world. What does that mean to you? What does that mean for the companies? And how, at the size that you are, how do you make sure that not only your employees get that message and understand what it means, but also your clients and constituents around the world?
Yeah. It's interesting because I articulate better care for a better world is just a wonderful cause and mission that really activates and inspires the organization on a lot of different fronts. And the way that we translate better care for a better world through the lens of sustainability is about our mission to make lives better with the smallest environmental footprint, which translates pretty well into the overarching ambitions and goals for sustainability for us that involve things like how do we help to support underserved and vulnerable communities through the purpose of our brands and make lives better, help improve health and well-being outcomes for people around the world, whether they're consumers or not. How do we support the communities and the consumers in the markets where we have business and operations? And then complementing that, of course, is how we do that in a way that reduces the environmental impacts of the work that we do. So positive social contributions with minimal social costs is the way to think about it. So our environmental goals then really revolve around 4 key areas that are pretty much focused on business relevance. Those things that we feel like we have an ability to meaningfully help and support. It's climate change. It's reducing waste and our use of single-use plastics. It's thinking about forests where some of the raw materials for our products are sourced to be sure that those forests remain healthy and viable going forward. And then finally, water, ensuring that where we have operations that consume a lot of water are doing so in a way that doesn't create any problems, liabilities, concerns with the communities around those operations. So we've got a pretty strong focus in those 4 areas.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, Lisa, that, you and I have had, we have years behind us, but it's interesting the times we live in today that I feel, but I would love your opinion on this, that the world is more interested in sustainability, ESG, circular economy, whatever you want to call it. And here we're talking about sustainability and better care for a better world than ever before. And that's, to me, we're at a very exciting inflection point where it's not a choice anymore. It almost feels like it's really, truly a DNA imperative of all great organizations to really roll up their sleeves and get with it.
Mm-hmm. John, I think that's so true, and it gets to that ambition that I think most people sitting in my seat and a lot of different companies have really been working for a long time, which is how do you integrate some of these principles into the ways of working of the entire organization of a large company or a small company is critically important. That means activation and integration into not just the supply chain, which is critically important, right? Looking across the, how we source raw materials to how we manufacture, very, very important, of course. But it's also about, what is the role that our brands play to engage their customers and their consumers in a different way? How do we align the purpose of the brands to the initiatives that we deploy in communities? How do we ensure that our research and engineering and our product design and materials development teams are all thinking about the environmental and social impacts of the next generation of Huggies diaper, for example? And that is an incredibly exciting part of the work, frankly, because the opportunity that sustainability presents to drive creative solutions and innovation is quite amazing, actually. And that's the big opportunity of the future is what's the innovation pathways? What are the innovation pathways and what do those look like? And how do we make good choices that allow the business to be resilient going into the future and for the long term?
Obviously, Lisa, you're a senior member of this whole sustainability and safety and health team, and nothing's more important than safety and health. And a company can't be sustainable without its people healthy and safe on a daily basis, 7/24. But what I'm always fascinated about is the process, Lisa. So when you get in a room with a whiteboard with your colleagues at Kimberly-Clark, and you start thinking about next year's CSR report and and your goals for the future, talk a little bit about your 2030 sustainability strategy and goals, what they are. But since you have such great experience at this and at the company, you're in a rare position, which gives you great clarity, but also, unfortunately and unfortunately, you see all the voids in the planet, and how do you choose in strata what to attack first in terms of goals and making the biggest impact and making the world, a better care for a better world in terms of making the biggest impact that you can during the next 5, 6 years, 7 years ahead of us?
Yeah, that is the question of the day, I would say, John. Really, because
give me the process. I want to hear the process.
Right. Sustainability can be defined in so many different ways, depending on the, it's in the eye of the beholder to a great degree, isn't it? So for us, the process is actually one of looking at two core aspects. One is from the inside of the business out, like looking inside the company out, what are our impacts on the world? So the greenhouse gas emissions that come from manufacturing our products, et cetera, inside out impacts. The second lens is outside in, what's happening outside of the company that has the potential to impact our business, whether that's regulatory developments or to your point earlier, shifting consumer perspectives and attitudes around sustainability, et cetera. So outside influences into the company. And we look at those then through two lenses. One, risk. If we look across that horizon, what risks do we see to the business? And then secondly, and probably more important, well, as importantly, are the opportunities that it creates. So we know that we can't touch every aspect of what some may define as sustainability. But when we look at those two outside in, inside out philosophies through the lens of our teams, our key stakeholders, we're able to really narrow the focus down to a critical few areas that we really want to lean in hard for and drive some big impact around. And those are those sustainability goals we talked about earlier.
Right. So, share some of, this is the Impact podcast, and impact has become, when I first started this podcast, Lisa, it was called Green is Good, which was a take on Gordon Gekko's Green is Good. And we trademarked it. And that's how we started as a radio show. There was no podcast when we started this show. Plus, we also don't take advertising dollars because we wanted to be able to curate the show with great people and great brands like yours, and not be bought and sold and anyone think we're hawking anyone's products and we're on anyone's payroll, because we're not. Social impact has become part of our vernacular and part of our lexicon now. Can you share some of the social impact projects that you and your colleagues are working on that you're most proud of at Kimberly-Clark?
Oh, sure. And I'm going to have to succumb to a call out for our Kotex brand here, John. The Kotex brand has done some really incredible work under the banner of Kotex She Can. And that the brand has at its heart a belief that a woman's period or a girl's period should never get in the way of her progress.
Right.
So they think about how they can provide education services, information about menstrual hygiene, health, access to menstruation solutions, education and sponsorship of school programs in various parts of the world, and then partnerships that allow them to amplify some of that support that they offer. So that's a key point of pride. And around the world, Kotex activates under that banner and designs initiatives that are most relevant to that market and to the specific consumer and community need that they see. So you can look all over the world at the Kotex brand and see activations that are very much in that space, right? Empowering women and girls.
And you have one, toilets change lives.
Yes.
Can we talk about that? I know these are a little bit off. I mean, they sound in abstract, they sound a little bit weird, but these are, but they're not, because this is part of our daily lives and functions. So you can make a huge impact when you're impacting people's daily lives and functions.
Yeah, you sure can. And that's the business we're in, right? Is helping to support all those essential needs that people have to get on with their lives. No question. So Toilets Change Lives is a program that's been in place for several years now that runs in support of our bath tissue business, quite frankly, our intimate care business, we call it. And it's really very much recognizing that it's great to have your toilet paper, but if you don't have running water in a toilet, it's kind of missing a key component and element of that need that people have. So the program is very much about providing access to improved or enhanced sanitation for parts of the world that don't have it, and it's shockingly a common issue all over the world. So the brands very much endeavor to tackle that problem around access to clean water and sanitation through toilets do in fact change lives when you have access to it, and you don't know that until you don't. Right.
For our listeners and viewers who've just joined us, we're so honored to have with us today Lisa Morden. She's the Vice President of Safety, Sustainability, and Occupational Health at Kimberly-Clark. To find Lisa and her great colleagues doing important work at Kimberly-Clark, you go to www.kimberly-clark.com. Lisa, before the pandemic, in the role that you have, which obviously is those three critical titles of occupational health, safety, and sustainability, did you have to travel a lot to go look at different vendors, facilities, meet employees around the world? How much of your life was back in your home base and how much was on the road?
We try and get out into the field as much as we can, John, is kind of our mantra here. And, we have such a diverse manufacturing footprint, and our business teams are spread out on virtually every region of the world at this point. And to truly understand, to your point earlier about our process, to really get the right insights from the different markets and folks around the world to help us design our sustainability plans and frameworks, you kind of have to go and sit with them. You have to tour the markets with them. You have to talk with their teams. You have to really kind of dig in to shape something that can be globally relevant, but locally customizable for the needs that we have around the world. So yes, long story short, plenty of time in airplanes. I think, of course, though, the pandemic has shifted that dramatically, and we've become so much more adept now at connecting virtually, like you and I are doing today, right?
Yeah, it's true. So what will be, and I don't want to ever call it new normal, because again, it's such a bad, I think, use of terminology. I like to say a new better. If we're going to talk about better care for a better world, let's just call it the new better post-pandemic. What will be the right balance in the new better world in terms of getting the face-to-face interaction that's critical for team building, bridge building, but also being sensitive to the environmental impact that planes have, and also the health impact it has on us as the travelers. I think none of us, I speak for myself, but I don't think any of us mind being on planes less. So
I can't disagree with you there.
Right?
John, no question.
So what do you think the new better looks like in terms of home office versus having to be in the field in the years ahead? How much does it change?
John, I think it's going to shift materially, actually, simply because our way of working now is much more dynamic and flexible, I would say overall. It can't replace the face-to-face relationship building, I think, that is so critical in a lot of ways, but we're becoming much more comfortable in building those relationships in 2 dimensions versus 3, I think. That being said, for us, there's always going to be a need for what we call the go and see. There's nothing that can replace the boots on the ground, being out in the stores, the retail environment, being out in our manufacturing facilities, if we're thinking about occupational safety, and helping to build capabilities and help to grow the talent and build the talent across the organization for some of these health, safety, and sustainability related principles. So there will be a new balance, I think, that we strike. Well-being, from my perspective, is also something that the world obviously is much more aware of or attuned to. Is, how am I feeling when I'm on an airplane? 70% of my time, probably not great, and we need our teams to be energized and engaged, and taking care of their own well-being and mental health and well-being as well. So
I'm with you.
I think we're going to find a new balance, honestly, that allows us to connect digitally more effectively, but not lose that in-person, on occasion touch point.
But if we're going to shift over to the issue of climate space and climate change, that's become sort of a hot button topic over the years. But I'm sitting and talking with you today in Fresno, California. It's 115 degrees here. This is the hottest summer we've ever seen in Fresno. I know most of the other regions around the country have seen huge shifts in their weather patterns over the last 30 or 40 years. So no matter what people say, if they believe or don't believe, they can have their own opinion, but the facts are the facts. And what's Kimberly-Clark's achievements been that make you proud of your work and your colleagues' work at Kimberly-Clark in the climate space?
With the sort of the long history of focusing on environmental sustainability, operational efficiency, and operational excellence, we've got this really great rhythm in the organization about how we can continuously drive improvements in energy efficiency and energy use reduction, which of course has a benefit in terms of the climate emissions that we can reduce and have reduced over years. And over the past decade, I would say we've also really been focused on looking at renewable technologies and alternative energy as well, and have been plugging in creative new technologies that are much more efficient, but also potentially lower carbon, lower cost alternatives. And certainly in this day and age too, where energy prices are certainly headed one direction and are quite high at this point in time, some of these projects are really helping the business, quite frankly, to be more resilient and sort of navigate through some of those inflationary pressures, if you will. One example that I would point to just recently from the company is our UK business has recently announced plans to work on a green hydrogen project with some partners to support our Barrow mill in the UK. That's really new technology, right? That has great potential in the decarbonization replacement for natural gas. It's not a done deal yet. We need to get some grant funding to support the work, but the collaboration there and the innovation, the technology to decarbonize the tissue manufacturing environment and take us to the next level of greenhouse gas emissions reduction is just incredibly exciting. So you see a lot more trends, I think, these days. Where we find the big wins is when we're collaborating with external stakeholders as well, right? It's not necessarily our invention, or it's not necessarily even our capital investment, but it's the partnership and the collaboration that we're finding that allows us to additionally improve the electrical grid or decarbonize our operations. Those are the things that the teams are quite excited and proud to be part of.
And then we go from the hot topic, and no pun intended, of climate change and making improvements in the climate movement to the issue of plastics. Plastics for consumer products companies, all consumer products companies, and no one's immune from both the benefits that plastics have given us, but also the knowledge that we have now is much different than we had 30, 40, 50, or 150 years ago when Kimberly-Clark was started. So can you share some of the goals, but also the challenges you face with regards of shifting the use of plastics from your products and packaging, and where are you going as a company? Because this is another big topic that consumers are very interested in, and makes a big difference in the world when groups like Kimberly-Clark shift their perspective on this.
Yeah, it's very relatable for consumers, isn't it? Right? Yes. I think, you couple that with some of the images you see of sea life being impacted by plastics in the ocean, et cetera. And it's very concerning to people. And it's a very emotive reaction that we all have when we see that kind of imagery. So it's really important for us to continue to look for alternative solutions, if you will, both because it's important to our customers and our consumers, but I think it matters to our employees as well, frankly. Right. And it is one of, frankly, the most substantial challenges that we face for our 2030 ambitions. It's one of the most ambitious goals I think that we have, and the solutions aren't crystal clear for us at this point in time. And we acknowledge plastics play a very beneficial place in the world and help with health and hygiene, et cetera. But you can't deny some of the environmental concerns that have emerged pretty dramatically on the global stage over the last several years. So I would say our approach is threefold. First, we're looking to, again, improve material efficiency, because that's just smart and good business, right? So use less stuff to get the same outcome is a key part of the strategy. Alternatives for virgin fossil fuel-based plastics is another lever. How do we think about bio-based, recycled contents, even biodegradable? The definitions around all of that are challenging, and the innovation pipeline is not ideal yet. Quite honestly, no crystal clear answers to solve for those dilemmas. But the third one then is around thinking about, you touched on circularity earlier. So how do you optimize circular material flows or the end of life solutions for products like ours? And I always talk about the fact that when you're thinking about personal hygiene products, there's a very high ick factor associated with end of life, right? So it adds a whole new layer of complexity and challenge to the equation for us. But if there is one area that I think I've seen our brand and our innovation teams really rally, it's around this particular challenge. And there's regulatory challenges and cost challenges and systems challenges. And we know that we won't solve the problem just as Kimberly-Clark alone, right? It's, again, that partnership model is going to be key. But it's just been incredibly inspirational, despite all of those challenges, to see how our teams have rallied around those challenges and have begun to really, challenge the prevailing thinking as we go forward. So it's exciting stuff.
One of the other points I want to make is what I've learned in this journey of doing these interviews over 15 years, Lisa, is that companies like yours are run and with great people like you and your colleagues, and we're just people. And there's nobody at Kimberly-Clark, and you included, and me included, as just someone who's interacting with you today, that doesn't want our children and our grandchildren to breathe cleaner air and drink cleaner water. So we're all in this together in terms of finding good solutions and to these very, very difficult issues. These issues aren't easy, scientifically not easy, and shifting 150 years of experience and practices isn't easy either.
That's so true. So true. And a lot of the systems change, right? It's you kind of, the system is designed to get exactly the outcomes that that the world has today. And shifting those systems is an uphill climb, quite candidly. They are quite optimized to do exactly what they do. So
right.
as we contemplate how to intervene and disrupt those, it's going to require some pretty breakthrough thinking and some pretty bold ambitions,
Absolutely.
if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. In terms of, before we did this this interview, I read about your heirs property support initiative and its connection to some of your fiber forest goals. Can you share more about that heirs property support initiative and what that really means to Kimberly-Clark and what that means to the environment around the world?
Oh, sure. I would love to. It's an incredibly important program. And I would say, Casey supports the program, John, but it really is the incredible folks at the Center for Heirs Property Preservation and the Mississippi Center for Justice that have been leading and driving that program. Kate Kimberly-Clark and our partners at WWF have helped to support their initiatives, but it's their talents, motivation, and expertise that are really shifting the discussion. So the work they do is about helping heirs property owners to secure their ancestral land and title to their ancestral land, where legally sometimes that can be challenging or in question. So a lot of families that don't have access to the right legal services can sometimes lose their property, or they will sell their property to and not necessarily reap the value that's a requisite to that property. So what that means, right, is oftentimes that ancestral land, which very often is a forested landscape, right, will get sold to a developer or for some other use, and that forest gets converted for other uses. And to us, it's that's part of the bread basket where Kimberly-Clark sources fiber for some of our personal care products. So we have a really strong interest in helping to support those families and those communities to maintain their ancestral land, and their forest land is working for us. It's good for them for building wealth. It's good environmentally because it keeps those forests as forests. And ultimately, there's a shared value that gets created as a result of that work. So we're incredibly honored to be supporting those two organizations and the work that they do. It's amazing stuff.
Lisa, it's we could spend hours here, and I'm on your website, and the work that you and your colleagues are doing at Kimberly-Clark is incredible. What's 30 years behind you? You got 2030 goals coming up that I know someone like you doesn't want to make goals and not hit them. What's the years ahead look like for you and your great team at Kimberly-Clark?
John, you hit the nail on the head, sir. We are very focused on being sure that we hit those 2030 ambitions and goals. To us, they're much more than just an ambition. They're it's a pipeline that we're very actively moving towards. But we're pleased with the fact that sustainability is so embedded in the company's purpose to deliver care for a better world. Going forward, it's all about continuing to drive that engagement and activation across our brand, supply chain, and innovation teams. And you mentioned ESG earlier, right? There are our list of active participation in the sustainability discussion is growing because of the ESG discussion with investors and others, and certainly continuing to support our investor teams and our board and our leadership team to help to support the ESG conversation going forward is a big opportunity as well. So exciting times.
Well, for our listeners and viewers, again, to find Lisa and all our great colleagues at Kimberly-Clark and all the important and impactful work they're doing in sustainability and beyond, you could go to www.kimberlyclark.com. And again, now after this interview, Lisa, our listeners and viewers know why GreenBiz in 2019 named you one of the 25 badass women shaking up the corporate climate movement. It's no surprise now. You deserve that title. You've earned that title. And it's truly an honor to have you on the Impact Podcast. And I'm very grateful and thankful to you for all the impactful, important work that you're doing to make the world a better place for all of us.
Thank you so much, John. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today. I appreciate the conversation.
This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com.